knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities, In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure having you all here. I can hear myself, but I think that's okay. Well, my name is Barbara Buchner. I'm the Global Managing Director of Climate Policy Initiative, and it's a true pleasure being here today for our side event at the IDFC pavilion here on IDFC's contribution to climate finance, a record high. So you can already imagine a little bit what we are going to talk about today. My name, again, is Barbara. I have been with CPI since the very beginning, and we have been working actually with the IDFC since many years on this green finance tracking here. Just for those of you who do not know what Climate Policy Initiative is, we are a global advisory and analytical organization. We have a very deep expertise in both policy and finance, and we work mostly with governments and financial institutions to really help drive economic growth while addressing climate change. You will hear more about the IDFC contribution very soon, but I can assure you that there will be some very exciting and very impressive figures that we will be hearing about. But before going into that, what I'd like to do today is just get us started and set the scene a little bit with our latest figures and information on CPI's global landscape of climate finance, which is a report and some work that we've been doing for over a decade now. So we bring a very deep expertise in this spectrum. Again, what we do is we bring together very many data sources and really try to provide the most comprehensive overview of how much money is going into climate action. And we do that by really trying to look both at public and at private financial flows. We look at global flows, but also domestic flows where we have the data. And we really try to show in a way how money is flowing along the life cycle of climate finance. So let me walk you through the key findings, and just again to get us started, there will be some great news. We have actually for the first time crossed the 1 trillion milestone in climate finance that has been mobilized. But there's obviously also some bad news, which is that ultimately what we see from our work is that we need more than 5 times what currently is flowing into climate action. And that I think is particularly important as we look back into this year, 2023, where we had all records broken in terms of heat around the world. So here you kind of see an overview of where we are. And again, building on this decade of tracking experience that we have established at CPI, you can see that average annual climate finance flows reached almost 1.27, so almost 3 trillion US dollars. These are again global climate finance flows, both public and private, and really kind of just trying to give you an understanding of where we stand compared to our global climate temperature goals. This 1.3 is actually a huge increase from our last full update of our climate finance landscape. It's climate financial flows almost doubled from the 4 years ago when we had the last full study on climate finance. This large increase is basically driven by two main developments. The first one is a real increase in mitigation finance. We've seen more than 440 billion US dollars of money going towards mitigation finance. And the remainder of the increase is actually driven by better data and more comprehensive data. And also that is a very important part, which is something that we've been trying to drive over the last decade as well. Just for your information, also what we are looking at is primary financial flows. So we really look at how much money is being invested, so really to understand the real economy impact. So at the project level, what is being built in terms of renewable energy projects, or how much is being invested in terms of absorptive capacity. So this increase obviously is very good news, but as you can already imagine, we are falling still far short of where we need to be. And what we've done here is bring together different studies from organizations, from the IEA to, for example, the Global Commission on Adaptation, to really bring an understanding of what are estimates of the needs in this space. And what we can see is that we are at least, again, 5 times short of where we need to stand. And if you look at the average figures, actually, we would need to be around 9 trillion US dollars by 2030, and even higher so if you go into 2050. I think also the other point I wanted to make on this slide here is let's put these figures into perspective. This 1.3 trillion are only 1% of global GDP this year, 1%. And we are spending at least 1 trillion in direct subsidies in fossil fuels and another 4 to 5 trillion in implicit subsidies into fossil fuels. So it's not only about kind of increasing the money into climate action, but it's also shifting existing flows away from harmful activities. I think the other point I wanted to make is that also delaying climate action and failing to keep the world on a 1.5 degrees Celsius trajectory will also result in significantly higher costs in the longer term. And I think what we've again tried to do is bring together different studies and show in a way what the cost of inaction are and how they are going to increase over time. The slide here shows you that how increasing the climate investments on the left-hand side here, in line with the needs for 1.5 degree scenarios, actually leads to considerable reduction in the social economic losses. And ultimately, if you would stick to business as usual, that would lead us to more than double of the losses of a 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. So just again, I can't help but show you our spaghetti diagram, which we have been doing now for over 10 years. We are now supposed to call it, my communications team tells me I have to call it Sankey diagram. It's still a spaghetti diagram because it was born in Venice when we had our first office there at CPI. But what you can see here is basically how money flows from the sources, so on the left-hand side, both public and private, through the instruments that are being used to the users and ultimately the sector. So really kind of showing how money flows across its life cycle. And let me directly go into the bigger picture of who is behind this 1.3 trillion US dollars. I think what we have seen is that actually public actors now a little ahead of private actors. And I think the big, obviously, point I want to make here and that I'm making actually since we started is the important role of development finance institutions. Development finance institutions out of the almost 640 billion US dollars that we are seeing are actually contributing more than 360 billion. So they are contributing about a third, like about 30% of the overarching public and private climate finance. So huge importance of development finance institutions. IDFC obviously plays a really key role in that one. I think it's about a third of that. So key role of that one. Just to continue to our findings in the context of where does it end up in terms of mitigation finance. We have seen actually this year for the first time a record high. We're about 1.2 trillion US dollars that go towards mitigation activities, and that's a 60% increase from our last figures, and that's mostly triggered by increases in electric vehicles and in the renewable energy sector. So this is a pretty big increase. You can also see that this is an area where the private sector actually has stepped up considerably. So you can see here in orange how the share of private investments into mitigation activities. And again, that I think is a good news because we can see that we have a growing maturity of many technologies that really attract private investors in this context. Still, also just to make the point here, what we are doing, we're looking at existing flows, but we're also comparing them to the needs, which is here in yellow. It's probably not that easy to see, but also on the secondary axis, we have actually the potential of different sectors. And while we have seen this huge increase in mitigation finance, we still see a huge need and a huge gap. And that's particular in absolute terms in the transport and energy sectors, but in relative terms, what we see is that a huge need to increase funding, particularly for the agriculture, forestry, and land use sectors, which I think is particularly important because we see a huge mitigation potential in these areas. So I think this is a real call for action to see here. Just turning very quickly into the adaptation finance, obviously another area that is attracting a lot of attention at this COP here. And I think here we don't have really good news because while we have seen in absolute terms a record high, so we are a little over 60 billion US dollars of adaptation finance, we have seen compared to the increase in other sectors actually a relatively modest increase. And so it's overarching. We have only about 5% of the overarching financial flows that go towards adaptation finance. Mitigation finance is about 91%, and the rest goes to activities that have both mitigation and adaptation benefits. And I think, again, the one important point here on adaptation finance that this is mostly financed by public actors, public financial institutions, and again, development finance institutions having an important, extremely important role. Showing you again the part of what needs to happen and how much more do we need in the context of adaptation finance. We've brought together again other estimates and can see that ultimately what we need for adaptation investments to happen is that they need to increase by at least 3.5 times from current level. So I think there is a lot that needs to happen. So hopefully there will be some good news on this action, on this area as well. Just going back to the global findings again, where does that money end up geographically? What we've seen is a continuation of a trend that we've seen over the last decade, which is that most money is actually being invested in East Asia and Pacific, followed by Western Europe, the US, and Canada. Together, these three regions actually attract almost 85% of all investment flows. So I think obviously that shows you also another point, which we've done for the first time in our landscape this year, where we've looked at least developed countries and developing countries and emerging economies, where much less finance is actually flowing. Least developed countries attract only about 2% of the overarching investment. So I think this is certainly another call for action that needs to happen. And the other point I just want to also bring up, which again is, I think, very important to think about how can we scale flows and investments into climate action, is that more than 80% of these global flows are raised and spent in the same country. So I think this really highlights the importance of enabling environment, of strong regulations, and really working with the domestic financial institutions to kind of build the market and scale up. So my last slide here is just like some of the recommendations, and I hope that we will get into those also when we come to our panel discussion here. I think the first one is there is a real need to transform the financial system, both across public and private finance. And I think obviously been talking a lot about development finance institutions, about the international financial architecture reforms this year. So I think this is something that certainly is important to continue, because I think these are institutions that are uniquely positioned to take on more risks and to use and leverage concessional money to unlock more private investments. Also in the private sector, I think we have seen some good news in terms of pledges and like net zero commitments, but they still need to really transform into action on the ground and into real capital flows that not only go towards climate action, but also go away from harmful fossil fuel activities. Second area, something that Remy actually has been talking about a lot, we need to bridge climate and development needs. Really, we need to better harness the benefits and the synergies between development and climate action that clearly exists there. But we also need to be much more careful as we think about phasing out fossil fuel, which are still very embedded in our economies, how we do that in a way that is just, how we do that in a way that really takes into account the needs on the local and community level. Third part, I already mentioned that one, mobilizing domestic capital is key. And in this context, obviously, it's not only about having very strong domestic regulations and enabling environments, as already said, but it's also about building the capacity. It's about technical assistance. It's about like having better monitoring and reporting systems and really making sure that we just build and deepen the domestic capital markets. And then the final point, just I always have to end on that one because it's very close to my heart, is we need to continue to improve the data. You cannot manage what you can't measure. So in the end, we have been doing a lot in order to get a better understanding of where we stand, but good data really can help you inform decision making and can help you understand both the gaps but also the solutions. So hopefully that's something that we will continue to work together and in a way also help standardize something which I sometimes call a wild west of many standards and of many taxonomies and methodologies. So I think there is still a lot we need to do. With that, I hope you've gotten a first impression of where we stand globally. But again, as I said, like extremely important to outline and stress the report, the role of development finance institutions. So without further ado, Nicola, I'm going to hand over to you to talk us through the IDFC latest screen mapping. So over to you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicola Picchettino, the Secretary General of IDFC, and I'm very pleased to be here with you, with all these fantastic panelists we will have the chance to hear. Before starting the discussion, I wanted to present you some of the key deliverables we released this year, starting with the green finance mapping. Thanks to Barbara, we had the chance to go through all the global needs for climate finance, and what we can say is that IDFC is the first provider of climate finance all over the world. We in 2022 provided 288 billion euros of climate finance, which is, if I take the figures of Barbara, more than 20% of the global finance in the world. Um, some figures too maybe highlight the fact that since 2015 we provided more than 1.5 trillion dollars, which is an impressive numbers too. We provided the highest mitigation finance with an increase of 31% from 2021, and also the highest adaptation finance with an increase of 52% from 2021. I go quickly because we will have the chance to hear more in details our two co-chairs, Javier Diaz and Sergi Cue. But I wanted also to share with you our state of ambition. You may all remember that in 2021, all the IDFC members committed to 8 commitments. And the first one was to reach carbon neutrality as soon as possible, of course, and transition to low carbon economy. We also committed to mobilize 1.3 trillion between 2019 and 2025. And at the end of 2022, we are about $900 billion. We also committed to support the energy transition toward a decarbonized economy, to end the provision of international public finance for new unabated coal power generation abroad by the end of 2021, and you will see that we succeed. We also commit to mainstream adaptation and resilience and climate transition and physical risk, to promote ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions, and also to continue to support adaptations efforts within countries of intervention, and last but not least, to strengthen support to integrated climate disaster risk management. I also wanted to share with you our new paper related on the post-2025 climate finance, and to highlight the fact that it will be discussed in detail on December the 5th at 9 a.m. on this pavilion with a specific side events. You know that some element of context in the Paris Agreement, it was set up that prior to 2025, we needed to fix a new collective quantified goal on climate finance. We also had last year during the last COP, the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue that was launched, and we are trying to reconcile in this paper these two positions. And to be very quick, but to just give you a taste of this paper, we within the IDFC, because we are the largest provider of public developments and climate finance globally, we commit to promote climate mainstreaming, and we are a trusted group of development practitioners. We will inform that the climate finance and the practitioner state of place and perspective regarding increased ambition and impact. We are also calling for an ambitious and systemic incentivized framework, and we signal in this paper that IDFC's availability to contribute further to technical dialogues and working groups. Some word quickly also about the common principles. It is linked to our green finance mapping. You know that the multilateral development banks agreed on the common principles to speak about the same thing when we are speaking about climate finance. And in DFC, we also agreed and approved those two common principles on mitigation and on adaptation, and I wanted to insist on the two side events on these specific pavilions that will discuss in details those common principles. But it's also it's important to highlight the fact that we agreed with those common principles again. Then one word about the signature of the Memorandum of Understanding with MCI that will be signed just after this event with our two co-chairs and Benoit Guéret over here, who is representing MCI. Towards MCI is a coalition of public and private financial institutions around the globe aiming to systematically integrate climate change consideration across their strategies, program, operation, and of course we are working closely with them, and we will in this MOU we will assess that we will do more with them. And just one word, because we are running out of time, about our climate facility. You know that within IDFC, we are producing papers, but we have also a technical assistance facility. And I wanted to share with you three main events, and maybe the first one on the fast track onboarding program. The second one is that we will sign with the German government a delegation of 20 million euros to support IDFC members in developing a low carbon and climate resilient urban infrastructure together with the municipalities. And last but not least, highlight the fact that we will sign also a fund delegation with the Global Climate Fund relating to just energy transition. And you have all the events that will discuss these subjects in detail on this specific pavilion. Thanks. I will give the floor to Barbara.
Thank you so much, Nicola. I think very impressive the suite of accomplishments that IDFC had, and I think I'm very excited to hear, particular well, that's both covering several of the recommendations basically that we've been looking at, both from kind of some of the data and the principles, but also technical assistance facility. I think that's great news. But with that, I'm very happy now to get started on our panel discussion here. We have a fantastic setup of panelists here, and I'm actually going first to our new co-chairman from the IDFC, which is wonderful to have you both here. Javier Diaz, who is the CEO of Bancoldex, and Serge Ecuyer, who is the CEO of WAD. And again, it's fantastic to have you both here, and I'm very excited about your leadership in this space. So I think what we'd like to get started just is hearing a little bit your reflections, as the new chairman of IDFC, of how you see these results that Nicola has been sharing with us, and really thinking about particularly the record high of green finance. What does that mean? And what is the basically what's the progress that you see in the context of kind of high ambition that IDFC is certainly reaching for? So I think I'll just, without further ado, I'll ask you to get started.
Thank you, Barbara. Greetings to you. Greetings to Nicolas, Remy, Serge, Benoit. It's a true honor to be here and sharing with everybody who's here to discuss this very interesting topic. So I will probably make 2 points. First one related to the IDFC, and second one related to the high interest rate environment in which we actually have to navigate. So regarding the IDFC, as Nicolas and you, Barbara, were speaking, I was looking at that board over there. And if I may just turn your attention to that board, this is what we have accomplished, which is tremendous. Since 2011, you can count record highs, you can count trillions, you can count new members, you can count mapping reports. So this is what we've done. Now, if I may please turn your attention to this board, this is the institutions who have actually done this. Again, tremendous, because as a club, we have been able to achieve that coming from over here. But even though we speak as one voice, those great accomplishments have been done more or less individually. It's the individual balance sheets of the banks and the institutions that are on this board which have accomplished that. So for the future, and speaking about co-chairmanship, which I am delighted to share with my friend Serge, The interesting thing will be to connect between ourselves. And I think we can share developments in that regard, which are extremely exciting. Let me just cite a few examples. BNDS is spearheading the Green Coalition to preserve the Amazon. We hadn't seen that before, and this is completely welcome. And you will be hearing a lot about that over the coming days. CAF is providing guarantees to members like ourselves, Bancoldex, COFIDE, and so forth, because CAF has better access to capital. CAF can access cheaper resources in the capital markets, and they pass on the cheaper rates to us, and then we do the same with our SME clients. BC, Argentina, it's going to require a lot of help. Argentina is going through turbulent economic times. So my sense of the future and of the club is on the fact that we are working together more now than ever, and deepening that collaboration, Barbara, is what will be helpful to achieving that quantum leap in terms of not staying at the 1.3 trillion landmark, but actually doubling and tripling that. So again, my faith is on deeper collaboration and joining the dots better on this part of the board. And then the second point is regarding high interest rates. Unfortunately, interest rates globally remain very high, and the same applies to our individual countries. So we need to lend cheaper, and that is not easily achieved, but it can be achieved. Again, it's the same collaborative mechanism whereby those who have access to better capital or who rely on stronger governments can actually pass on those benefits to those of us who don't. And again, I would like to highlight examples. AFD is working with Bancoldex, who I represent, on getting a Colombian peso denominated loan, something which would have been unthinkable 5 years ago, maybe even less, is now being achieved. So those examples, I think, are illustrative of how collaboration amongst ourselves will actually provide better results and more accelerated green financing in a very, very challenging environment because economic growth is not helping. So the planet is growing meagerly. Economies are growing negatively in some ways. So I'll probably stop there for to leave room for the next question. But again, to recap, wonderful achievements, better connections will actually take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very helpful looking backwards, but also looking in what needs to happen in order to build on all what has been done over the last year. So collaboration. But Serge, over to you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you, Remy, Benoit, and naturally Javier, Nicholas. Thank you. Thanks to all for being here. The good thing is that Javier has said everything, so I'll do the rest. So what is left with me is basically nothing much but two things here. The first thing is the alignment, the clear alignment we all have on the objective of climate finance. How are we going to reorient the climate finance system to our objectives? It is clear that we share the same goals because we basically face the same reality. As you know, this part of the world suffered a lot of climate change, and we are devoted to change that. So the objective is very clear, and I think we share this. The second thing is it is a question of quantum. It's a question of volume. Um, to win this battle, I think we have to allocate as much means and balance sheet as possible. It is a question of quantum. The problems are deep, and we know that we need to do the right thing and try to do things right. So when it comes to our numbers, the quantum, what has been described here is is amazing. That is very clear. It is amazing. But we know that the magnitude of the disasters uh, 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 will lead us to do even more. So we know that we have to think. We have to think out of the box. We have to think and innovatively we have to see how the global market, capital market, can be used, reoriented for the objectives I previously mentioned. So we're working on that, and we will, in a few weeks or so, will come on we'll disclose a transaction we're currently working on, so as to combine our forces to reach the right quantum that is needed to face our challenges. That will be all for me at this point in time. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeff. And yeah, I think what I love about this panel here is really kind of that there is real examples. So it's not just like talking about what could happen, but really showing that there is thinking outside of the box and really trying to innovate in order to kind of get to the scale we need. I think no one better than Rémi Rieu, obviously, to talk about that. Rémi, who is the CEO of Agence Française de Développement, was the IDFC chairman and has been leading the organization to where it is certainly today, but is also the chairman of the Financing Commons Summit, which I think is the next stage, which really helps ensure that we use this whole ecosystem of public development banks to make a change. So Remy, love to just get your reflections also on where do we need to go, but also that we have heard about alignment already. How can we make sure that there is actually that the banks actually are aligning their portfolios better with the Paris Agreement, with the goals, with climate action. And basically, I see a very easy question for you here is, so how do you imagine the future of climate finance? So I think we can stay here for a few more hours.
Thank you. Happy to be back at the IDFC pavilion. It's a good tradition now since Madrid, if I'm right, the first time. And so all colleagues in the room, Paolo there, we're all partners in crime, in fight, I would say, against climate change since 2011 for IDFC, all IDFC colleagues, following now our two co-chairs, dear Javier and Serge, and we're partners in crime also with Barbara since COP21 2015 and the first assessment of climate finance and where we stood at that time regarding the 100 billion. It's still here if I'm right in these rooms. So we did a lot, but our journey has not ended at all. And we need to do it again here in Dubai and have our collective voice heard loud and clear and help the negotiators, of course, move forward. What happened since 2009 in Copenhagen, then 2015 in Paris is climate finance actually was born and is relying on ODA, on development finance. So we, in our institutions as development finance institutions, we have a sort of treasure, and something strange happened. I mean, we were in a very remote place in the financial system, all of us, and somehow we came back because we are more patient, maybe because we accumulated a knowledge about climate that was not in commercial or in investment world. And it's a bit awkward at the same time because we were not used to be attractive or to be called into something that was not exactly the development finance, actually. So it helped for a moment, and it pushed ODA above 200 billion US dollar, which is not that bad. And we work collectively on what it means to align when on the supply side, of course, our projects financing, but also more important on the demand side, meaning what it means for our clients and partners to align. So this is the knowledge now we have. But my feeling is that this mandate is somehow overburdening all of us now, especially now that we know we have to triple or quadruple what we're proud of it already achieved. So yes, there's a new moment we have to define to be consistent with the goal, a moment where we have to reconcile climate and development, true, in a single narrative and framework that would push us further where we need to be in each country and in terms of international cooperation. So we need a new global financial architecture. And from day one, IDFC now with FIX has been, in my view, prefigurating what this new global financial architecture is about, meaning embarking local, national financial institutions, because we have to turn the system somehow upside down to originate the number and the quality of projects that is needed. And then we have to disintricate somehow in this financing world something for the most vulnerable, not the poorest, but the most vulnerable, as a sort of guarantee. So that's the discussion around loss and damage, of course, plus part adaptation, plus classic ODA, I would say, humanitarian. That's one pot, and we have to be very clear about it, so that we can unlock the 2.1c discussion, which is about the contribution of public investment for the reorientation of the financial system as a whole. And we're still a bit unclear, I think, in the way we are all thinking. But I see and I hope IDFC, of course, because of the friendship, because of the depth now of our cooperation, that will only increase under our new leadership, as Serge and Javier already started to explain. We'll have a key contribution on all this, so that again the political side will be reassured that it can take stronger commitments because they will be financed and implemented in the end.
Thanks so much, Remy, again, helping us to understand really what lays ahead of us. And I think you particularly point on 2.1c, how to align, what do we need to do, like reflect and be very clear of, learn the lessons of what has worked and what hasn't. And I think, Benoit, you obviously have been, and I foresee, been at forefront thinking about, Paris alignment and, what's the role of public development banks. So I'd love to get your reflections on that as well.
Well, thanks, Barbara. I have two hats today. I'll be speaking with two voices. The first voice will be I'm the managing director of I4C, the Institute for Climate Economics, a think tank dedicated to financing the transition. And the second voice is we are the secretariat of the mainstreaming climate in financial initiatives, but I'll talk about it later on. Two things. I mean, I will merely echo what has been said because lots have been said, and I will echo a little bit and provide some complementary comments. First, when you look at the numbers, they're great. I mean, both the numbers that Barbara and Nicolas pointed out are great. They concretely show the commitment of the A5 to finance the transition. Good. We see billions. Excellent. However, I will echo what Serge said. It's a matter of size. I mean, quantity matters. We need to put some money on the table, and public money, and use it wisely. Second, and I will complement this quantity item with a quality item. It's not only about putting money on the table. If it were that easy, we'd be happy people. It's also a matter of addressing the barriers to actually prevent the market from doing what the market needs to do to finance the transition. And that's where development finance institutions can actually be instrumental, despite their, challenge me, relatively small size. They're quite small, but they're instrumental. In French, we tend to say petit mais costaud for those who have a reference. Then afterwards, and I'll try to explain to you what it means. Basically, they're small but hefty and with possibly some impact. Second thing, when as you pointed out, Barbara, the numbers are impressive. However, we are nowhere near enough to get to 1.5 and 2 degrees, let alone 1.5. So, what can be done? I see three challenges for DFIs in the coming years. Three items that I'd like to flag. First, uh, DFIs cannot solely look at financed emissions. Because they have development mandate, because they have a mandate, because they have development objectives, they need to look beyond financed emissions and tons of CO2. Just to make a long story short, so it's not only looking at dollars, and it's not only looking at tons of CO2 abated through their financed emission. The bulk of the contribution of DFIs is actually, my point of view, is be expected from the means of implementation that those DFIs can actually help out. That includes climate finance, but it's not limited to climate finance. And consistency, and since I remember who said that, Article 2.1.c, perhaps basically consistency with Article 2.1.c that needs to be looked at. It was in your presentation, Nicolas, if I'm not mistaken. That's what we need to aim for. Is the action of a DFI is consistent with Article 2.1.c? That's the only question that needs to be asked and the only question that needs to be answered. And that's my third point. Volumes, then again, are great. And when I look at this side, sorry, Javier, I'll take your your picture as well. When I look at this side, impressive. 5 years, 10 years down the road, I could see even bigger figures, and I'd be even more impressed. But question I would like to see, or the answer I would like to see in a couple of years, is how have those institutions on the left-hand side, how have they actually contributed to the rolling out, the implementation of an NDC, an LTS, etc., and a transformation of the economy of a given country to make it consistent with 2.1.c. And given the membership of IDFC, I believe landscapes, the global landscape is great, national, regional landscapes, assessing what is done against what needs to be done, that's great, and that's a great roadmap for development institutions. I'll keep it short.
Thanks so much, Bernard. And as you know, I couldn't agree more. I think we really need to go at the country level, at the sector level, even to really understand the needs, and then come up with the, who can do what, and who are the actors, and what's the role of development finance institutions together with others, and how can you bring them together. So I think your points and the consistency with 2.1c, but also I think ultimately you were talking about the impact really that money has. So it's not only about the volume, it's also about how you use the money most effectively. Extremely important. But you already said, okay, so you want to see what these institutions here actually do to get more on that side. So I think that brings me back, Javier and Serge, to you, really trying to understand a little bit, not now as your head as the IDFC chairman, but really as CEO of Banco de what is it that you are planning to do? What's the contributions of your institutions in this context? So over to you again, Javier.
Thank you. So again, I'll try and make 3 points to answer the question. First is when you look at the institution, of course, I speak for Bancolex, but I think this may apply to DFIs across the table. We typically tend out to look out for our bottom line, net profits, and return on equity. We have to. We're bankers. Even though we're public development institutions, we are bankers. But I think going forward, return on equity has to be kept at a level which is low, safe, but with more emphasis on impact. So that fine line between making money and preserving the institution, or making less money and providing for better and deeper impact, has to be navigated. And I think that's a crucial point because again, we cannot, in order for our institutions to commit to what we need to do, we need to preserve them, but we can't preserve them so much that we don't accomplish the mission. So I think that's for finance and accounting and impact, and all the do good that we have to do have to come into play. So my first point is, let's not focus so much on return on equity. Let's focus on impact, making sure we also keep the institution safe. Second point would be innovation. When we do this, and as we collaborate more with each other, we need to provide for different lines of credit, different projects to be financed. And I can cite examples from home. We have microfinance lines of credit for climate adaptation. And at least in the case of Colombia, more than 90% of enterprises are micro enterprises. So even though we need to work with the big, because the big numbers are with the big projects, we need to work in large volumes with microfinance and small and medium enterprises. So that would be my second point. And I guess I'll probably go back to again, it's all about collaboration. If we only look at the balance sheet of Bancolex in Colombia's case, then we're missing on the bigger picture. We need to work more with our sister institutions, Findeter and FDN and so forth. And regionally, of course, deepen integration with CAF and the others. So again, to me, it's all about collaboration within the country, outside of the country, and making sure that we fulfill our mission, because sometimes we tend to be lax, sometimes we tend to just be complacent on the fact that we're doing good, but we have to deepen, making sure that it's all about impact and not just about the financials. So I'll probably stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. On our side, we have launched our strategic plan in 2021 for the period 2021, 2020, 2025, and we have committed to spend 25% to allocate, sorry, 25% of our balance sheets. So this is new money to climate finance. So which is brand new for us. And as Javier has rightly mentioned, we're now focusing more and more on impact. So yes, the question of the quantum of the volumes are important. But you're right. Technically, we need to do things differently. So 25% of our actual finance is strictly dedicated to contribute to climate mitigation and adaptation. And to do so, the question of cooperation is essential, naturally, and we're more and more working with climate funds. The first of all, the adaptation fund, the green climate fund, but also the green and global environmental fund, and that give us the access to larger fund, but also give us access to technical assistance when it comes to mitigation, but also to adaptation. When it comes to the impact, the question of the impact, we have also worked on how to spare, how to limit the CO2 emissions, and this is generally applied, equally applied, I would say, among our 8 members country, which is basically brand new. So it's very concrete, it's very granular, and it's a strong commitment that has been basically approved by our shareholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think again, the clear goals here, but at the same time, this collaboration, I think comes back and again. And I think also have a very unique role in how you can bring together different actors, because the ecosystems, you have access, the market. So I think extremely important. But brings me actually back. I think the last question back to you, Benoit. And I think again, to do this role of collaboration partnerships like the IDFC, but also MCI, which we have already heard there will be some signing going on very shortly. So what is it that you think the role of these types of partnerships are?
Well, those partnerships are paramount. I mean, I like sharing. I like, as you said, Javier, you said deepening collaboration, sharing. Those are very important words, and networks are paramount in this effort. Just a couple of words about MCI, Mainstreaming Climate in Financial Institutions. We are an initiative that brings together 50 plus financial institutions, public and private, but from developed and developing economies, and the target is to mainstream climate into the considerations and operations of each financial institution. So basically what we focus on is on sharing experiences, good and bad. Even sharing a bad experience is sometimes valuable, and even more valuable than good experience if you understand why you haven't succeeded yet. We never fail, we don't succeed yet. Well, that's different. And the objective is also to lead by example and show that things are feasible, moving from, oh, we can't do it or it's impossible, to, oh, yeah, we've tried it and we haven't succeeded yet in the worst case. So concretely, what we provide is three things: a framework with 5 voluntary principles that members are required to adhere to. Second, resources from research, but also from the field, practitioners, resources that can actually break down the journey towards climate mainstreaming into concrete steps. So moving from what needs to be done to how to do it concretely. And third, we have a platform for discussion that is provided through dedicated events to the members. So that's a secure platform in the sense that members can freely exchange on what they've succeeded in doing and what they haven't succeeded yet in doing. So we have a number of dedicated events. Now I understand IDFC shares similar events, and the partnership that we are about, the MOU that we're about to sign is basically formalizing what has been done in the past years concretely, because as far as I know, half of the members of IDFC are also members of the initiative. So there's a clear connection between the two. And we welcome, we'd like hopefully all members of IDFC to join the initiative and become climate deniers, so to speak. We don't care about the current level of implication. We care about ambition. So if you're bad, come and join us and improve. That's basically our message. If you're good, come and join us and show the rest of the world how to do it. That will be my message basically to the members. And I welcome this partnership with IDFC. Then again, it's only formalization of something that has been done over the years since COP21, if I'm not mistaken.
But thank you so much, Benoit. And again, I do have to commend you on all you've done. I think sometimes it is important to formalize these types of partnerships. Also, as Remy said before, to help influence others and showcase basically what's happening. So I think it is a great step to kind of just showcase this. But we are getting, unfortunately, I think to the end of our time. And again, we could certainly continue much longer, but there will be lots of side events, as Nicola has shown here. So come back to this space a lot. I think just my takeaways from this discussion here, I think we need to obviously focus on the quantity and the quality. So the quantum, let's make sure that we continue to build on this side, but at the same time, let's really focus on the impact of the money, and let's make sure that the money that you already have in the system is being used more effectively, and through collaboration, bring in other pools of capital. So quantity, quality, innovation, again, I think is something. Innovation doesn't necessarily mean you need to come up with new things all the time. Very often it is something that has been done and that just can be scaled, or has not been done in the green space. So quantity, quality, innovation, collaboration, I think was the clear kind of key takeaway across all within the country, outside of the country, regionally, globally, across different constituencies. I think extremely important. And the final point, I think capacity, which came up several times, but also from you, Nicola, technical assistance, these types of facilities, these ways of working with others who have technical assistance support, I think is extremely important. But yeah, ultimately it is about connecting the two sides here, but not only, going beyond them and bring together the whole ecosystem. So thank you so much, and please join me in thanking my panel here. Thanks all.
Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals: knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals: knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you all, and a very warm welcome to this workshop on climate risk management and long-term financing. So thank you very much all for being here. My name is Claire Chalier. I'm the head of the Mainstreaming Climate and Financial Institutions Initiative, an initiative that brings together 53 plus financial institutions from public and private sectors and from covering the whole world. And we co-organize this event with BND, with the idea, I think, of trying to provide some insight, reconciling the long-term challenges posed by climate change with some of the more operational and short-term realities that some financial institutions typically face. So we've planned quite a dynamic discussion for today with our very esteemed panel of speakers who's right here with me from development banks. And we also have two experts from the climate change field and climate finance that have joined us online. And before we start, I'm extremely honored to be introducing Luciana Aparecida de Costa. I'm sorry if I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. You're Director for Infrastructure, Energy Transition and Climate Change at the Brazilian National Development Bank's BNDES. And you'll be sharing some overarching considerations on how your institution covers these challenges. So I'll pass the floor over to you. Thank you, Luciana.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much. Thanks for all. First, I would like to thank everyone, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today to listen a little bit about the challenges of climate finance, how banks address climate risk, and what we are doing to make our balance sheet cleaner. Because there is I'm very sure about one thing. If we don't mobilize capital to invest in climate change and energy transition and agriculture transition, the world will not meet climate needs. We are late in the process. Greenhouse gas emission are still issuance is still increasing, so there is a huge concern on that. But I'll talk a little bit about the NDS. These two, I mean, I will go quickly through this, but you already know that, we have to figure out how we are going to meet the 1.5 degree. It's difficult, but I think we can still make it. But of course, we'll have to put more effort on that. What we think about energy transition. First of all, it's a path of no return, and it's about the world has to figure out how to do a just transition and socially just. This is a complex process, and poor people can be highly impacted. Brazil is the fifth largest greenhouse gas emitter, but may be the first economy in the G20 to reach carbon neutrality. Brazil doesn't need, can you hear me? Brazil doesn't need any new technology in order to reach that because of some characteristics that we have. No? Can you hear? Can you hear? Okay. So Brazil is the fifth largest global emitter, but may be the first big economy in the G20 to reach carbon neutrality. What's the challenge for Brazil? We are a developed country. Cost of capital is very high in our country. And the US, Europe, Australia, Japan, they are announcing multi-billion plans for reindustrialization, and we don't have the same means. We don't have fiscal space for that. But we have some natural comparative advantages that I will discuss with you that can put Brazil in a position to be one of the leaders in the greenhouse gas emitter. This is very important. We have geopolitical stability. Brazil, it has been 150 years that Brazil doesn't have wars with our neighbors. So that's a very good outcome for the country. We have diplomatic relations with all United Nations. And we are a country of continental size, having the fifth and seventh world's largest territory and population. We have abundant resources, and we can contribute to food security in the world. So we have the biggest tropical forest, the largest biodiversity in the world. We have 13% of the fresh water in the world, and Brazil it's a big food producer. We have a clean energy matrix and key mineral reserves. Brazil has a very competitive wind and solar energy costs. And Brazil will have, according to Bloomberg NEF, the cheapest green hydrogen in the world in 2020. We have mineral reserves, we have critical minerals. I'll show details on that. We have an interconnected systems and hydroelectricity serving as a battery, which means uh, we can deliver renewable energy anywhere in the country, despite having a country of continental sizes. And this government is putting a strong priority on this agenda. Brazil is now giving the message that this is the focus for the country, with the ecological plan, with the new green taxonomy in place, with the framework for the green economy that we are working on. So here are some numbers from Brazil. We are the fifth largest greenhouse gas emitter, but 74% of our greenhouse gas emission comes from deforestation and agriculture and land use, and our NDCs. But so that number shows that our biggest challenge is to control deforestation. And Lula government has done that in the past. So this is the number. Between 2005 and 2012, the government was able to reduce 84% the deforestation rates. And we have done already, and we have reduced it 49.7% from January to October. So this is a number that shows that Brazil is doing its homework to control deforestation. And what's the message behind this? Deforestation, it's not related to GDP, it's related to crime. So in order to control deforestation, we have to control the crime. We have to fight crime. It's not related to GDP. It's cheaper to decarbonize, to reduce greenhouse gas emission than any other developed economy, which because some countries they have to change completely the power matrix, the energy matrix, industrial process, which is not the case for Brazil. So it's cheap to control deforestation. About BNDES, despite those comparative advantages that I mentioned, we have BNDES. BNDES is the largest development bank in Latin America. It's a huge infrastructure bank, is the main financier of infrastructure and energy in Brazil, and not just for today, for 7 to 1 years. BNDES is a 7 to 1 year bank, very focused on infrastructure and energy. So we are key for industrial and ecological transformation plan. Our corporate rating, of course, is capped by the sovereign rate. Some numbers of BNDES. BNDES has financed more than 80% of the energy in Brazil, all the subways, more than 50% of the railroads, the toll roads. BNDES is also, according to Bloomberg NEF, the largest financier of renewable energy in the world. And in our climate agenda, here I will talk broadly about what we are doing. Our challenge first is on how we will address the climate risk in order to better manage our portfolio, and how we work to make our portfolio greener, but also to push the economy for a greener path. So this is our pipeline on what we are doing. Some of our policies. I will give this presentation for you, so you have our details on what we are doing. Here is the sectors that we are really focused on. As you can see, it's related to ecological plan and with a growth plan of the Brazilian government. Here, this is important. How we allocate our resources in order to achieve what we have to achieve, and how we control our portfolio. So you see, in the pipeline definition, we take not only financial risks into consideration, but climate risks into consideration. And it's not just about approving the right credits, but also we have to monitor our portfolio on what we are doing. So inventory, we are working on our greenhouse gas emission on the inventory of the bank, but we don't want to look only on what's the inventory of carbon emissions in our balance sheet. We want to know how BNDES is acting on carbon capture and also avoidance of greenhouse gas emission. We have to have an holistic view on that. So this is where we are. We are working on our inventory and where we are going in the future. We will need to have like a broader picture and see where we are going and what we are doing. So we are also working on our green taxonomy. That's very important, and it's related to we are doing that in alignment with the Minister of Economy of Brazil. Climate adaptation, it's very, very important. I think, and I think that's in a nutshell what we are doing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luciana, for setting the scene nicely with the context that you're operating in and the different tools, and in particular those related to climate risk that you've been implementing and mainstreaming throughout your organization. Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. And I think I'll now pass it over to our two speakers who are online, who are going to be joining us online. We're going to jump into today's discussion by hearing from two experts that are going to be sharing the latest research they've been working on, both from UNEP FI and the NGFS. And then we'll give the floor after that to three practitioners from public development banks who will share their experience and try to reflect on what will have been said. So without any further ado, let me give the floor, if everything is all right, to David Carlin. David, great. We can see you on screen. Good afternoon, David. You're head of climate risk and TCF at TCFD. You're going to take us through the latest report. Can you hear us, David? Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Climate risk
It's really wonderful to.
Yes.
Great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I think there might be a slight
Terrific.
time difference, but that's fine. I'll leave the floor over to you. Thank you, David. Everyone can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again for having me here. So as mentioned, I'm the head of risk at the UN Environment Programme's Finance Initiative. I also lead a number of other advisory projects and programs across the world on climate and sustainability. I'm really thrilled to be here with you. I'm sorry that it is virtual, but I'm hoping for many of you who will be at COP over the next week and a half to be able to see you in person when I do arrive. And one thing that I wanted to speak about, and I'll share my slides in a moment, is really the role of risk management and disclosure in emerging economies, because I think there's a big misconception that is that either you are a mitigator and you are actively working on reducing emissions, you're part of one of the net zero alliances. It looks more like countries in Western Europe, in North America, in Japan, or you are sort of a passive victim of climate change, a country that is struggling in the face of adaptation. And I think that narrative really is totally wrong, because the science is really unequivocal that the challenges that we face are global challenges. Our net zero goal is not a country goal, is not a firm-wide goal. It is a planetary goal. And adaptation, again, is something that is a critical element that goes globally. And we just saw yesterday, of course, really promising and exciting progress on the loss of damage funds. That was really wonderful to see. What I wanted to really spend a bit of time with you speaking about is particularly how the emerging economies can both improve climate risk management, understand some of those risks, and also align disclosures in order to produce the better information needed. And so really seeing financial institutions in these countries, governments in these countries, as active participants in both the climate mitigation and adaptation journeys. And I think that understanding that agency and power is so critical. And so we're really thrilled today to be releasing the new report in 3 parts that I will share with you. And that is something that we've developed not only ourselves, but also through consultation with the International Sustainability Standards Board to provide guidance on what good risk management looks like. And I always say that it's not about the disclosure itself. The disclosure is a reflection of what you're trying to do and what you are doing in terms of risk management. So we'll talk a little bit about what the report covers, and then provide a few examples of that, and then open that up to any questions you might have. So relatively quick presentation, but really excited to be releasing this report today. It's now freely available on the UNEP-FI website in our new resources tab. Essentially, this report really focuses on what resources exist for policymakers, financial institutions, and others who are beginning to explore climate risks in emerging economies. It looks at what the risks and opportunities look like on both the physical and transition side in a number of different countries. We try to use case studies in order to do that. So looking at different parts of the world, in Latin America, in parts of Asia, in parts of Africa, parts of Europe, and really give a sense of what some of those risks look like practically. Then what we tried to do is really speak about, in line with the latest guidance from the International Sustainability Standards Board, that global body now that is working on climate disclosures, to put forth recommendations on how to get started, how to make effective disclosures, how to answer questions around what do we do for scenario analysis? What do we do if we don't have the data? How do we get started? Who on our senior team should be involved? These questions I'll show you in a minute are many of the ones that form the body and basis of our recommendations. And then finally, the end is filled with both recommendations and case studies for both supervisors and financial actors alike, in order to both accelerate the uptake of practices, also to use these in a more effective way. And so we cover a variety of different case studies and risks, from, as you can see here, from China to the Philippines, from Chile to Tunisia, looking at some of the different risks and hazards faced. And this is really to help people think in a more conceptual way, not just to figure what is the immediate risk that they face. Maybe are there some risks that they might be missing, and some risks that might be causing greater challenges to them that they plan for. So what we did was we also tried to align with the guidance that the TCFD had developed, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, over the last number of years around what good disclosures look like. And then, as I said, we really made this report into this practical toolkit where we covered these 6 areas: getting started. We covered then the governance pillar, the strategy pillar, risk management, metrics and targets, and additional considerations, really with an eye toward figuring out how do we answer some of these key questions? What are the main ways in which we want to put these things together, and how do we potentially do that? And so that's one of the things that I think is super important, and really something that we're very eager to do, and give people an idea of not only how to tackle each pillar, but how those pillars really connect to your practices of risk and opportunity management. Because again, it is the opportunity side as well. We shouldn't just be thinking of risks. And so understanding how this leads us to a better overall strategy, how this leads us to better overall risk management, and then finally, how that fits into our full-on operations. We then discussed some recommendations around for supervisors, suggestions on using that four-pillar framework of governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. We discussed also what kind of assessments can be done. You're going to hear shortly from Thomas, who's been really instrumental at both Banque de France and the NGFS in leading a lot of these things. So many of our suggestions are ones that take the great work from the NGFS and NGFS guidance and really just aim to make it more available and accessible to others who may have come at this from engaging with UNEP-FI and our work. We also looked at some other initiatives that can be done from a regulatory standpoint and also from institutions. How do we actually get these things going? How do we build forward? And so looking at building effective transition plans, joining financial initiatives, and thinking about capacity building as well. And so that's one of the areas in which we're really looking to not only see guidance from us, but also action. And I think this year needs to be a COP of action in the same way 2024 really needs to be a set of actions both on us tackling our climate risks and us changing our strategies to really align to these opportunities. So how do we get involved? How do we make progress here? This is, the final part of the report provides those recommendations. So that's really the bulk of what I wanted to share today. I wanted to take a few questions. I will mention one other resource that is available that we're in the process of updating. That is our climate risk landscape report that focuses on climate tools. So just very quickly, just to say, if you are interested in that report, it's also freely available. It looks at transition risk approaches, physical risk approaches, and we're also really proud to be using a new database that we've created. It has over 50 different climate tools within. You can search by, you can look at it. It's very accessible. It's in Excel, so it doesn't, have any potential permission restrictions. And the goal there is really to give you an opportunity to think about what tools might be useful to you, how to engage with them, and to go from there. So anyway, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think we may have a few moments for questions, but I'll hand back to the room for maybe a few of those.
Thank you very much, David, and congratulations on the publication of your report. I'm very much looking forward to reading it myself, and I'm sure we'll have a couple of questions. Well, if that's okay, because you just mentioned the work that Thomas Allen had been doing, I suggest that we have his presentation first, and we pass the floor over to him. If you can wait a little bit, and then we'll have the questions and answers. We can take both sets of questions and answers for your presentations together, if that's okay. David, you can stay with us, right? Yeah. Great. Well, in that case, just let me turn to Thomas Allen. You're a senior advisor to the head of secretariat at the NGFS. I hope you can hear us. We can see you.
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. And you'll be presenting some of the NGFS's work on climate scenarios. And so very much looking forward to that too. The floor is yours, Thomas.
Many thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy as well to be with you and I apologize not to be in the room with you today. But some of my colleagues from the NGFS Secretariat are in Dubai and please, if you happen to be meeting them, please, they will be very happy to engage with you. So yes, today for this presentation, so I thought I would say a few words about the NGFS, who we are, what we do. And then I thought I would focus a bit more on some of the activities we are doing within the NGFS that provide a forward-looking approach. A forward-looking approach which is as David mentioned, highlighted quite clearly that we need the forward-looking approach to assess climate risk. So I'll try to be focusing on that. Let me know when you see my screen. Hoping you will see my slides as well.
For the moment, we have the concept note, I think.
Not yet.
That's it. Perfect.
And now do you have another slide?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, you do. Perfect. So my presentation is going to focus on this forward-looking approach. But just a few words about the NGFS first. So this network for greening the financial system. So it is a group of central banks and supervisors which have been willing to share best practices in this field of climate risk management and green finance. It was set up in December 2017, so about 6 years ago now, with 8 founding members. And now we have grown to over 150 members and observers. And I think that underlines the importance of climate change today to the financial community. Overall, we like to see ourselves as a coalition of the willing, with members committed to engage in discussion and actions on the implication of climate change and of the transition for our mandates and within our mandates, and more specifically discuss also our role as central banks and supervisors in supporting the transition. The NGFS gave itself 2 key missions. First one is to enhance the role of the financial system to manage the risk associated with climate change and transition. And David was also providing some vision on that. And also to mobilize mainstream finance to support the transition toward a sustainable economy. And to this end, to be very clear as to how we proceed, how we work, NGFS members engage in sharing experiences, sharing best practices, and we also conduct or commission some work, analytical work, on green finance. So as you can see from the way how we are structured, but I won't be long on that, what you can see from our structure is that we are really focusing around the key mandate of central bank and supervisors on supervision, on macrofinancial stability, on monetary policy, but also on our own operation as central bank and supervisors, such as our engagements towards sustainable responsible investment, but also disclosure of our own portfolio. And then we've got a number of other activities that really try not to be just focusing around climate, but try to look also at extending the frontier barrier going beyond climate into more broader environmental risk. And we've got some specific working group working on that. So now I think that's enough for the what the NGFS is. I would like really to focus now a bit more on these forward-looking approaches that the NGFS has been working on. And I will start with an update and some highlights on the NGFS climate scenarios. David mentioned these tools that the NGFS has been working on, and it's been just a fifth edition that's just been released. I'd like to give you with some highlights on this latest release. And I will also briefly present some key insight on the use of transition plans as a forward-looking tool for supervision. And finally, there's been recognition within the NGFS, mentioned that earlier, that while we certainly haven't achieved what we need to do on climate, but in parallel, we need to already be on climate. We need to explore broader nature-related risk. So first on climate scenario analysis. So the NGFS has been working on climate scenarios since 2019, and the rationale is quite straightforward. Climate change impacts are predictable, but they are unprecedented. So the exact outcome, the exact timing, magnitude are uncertain, and they are also dependent on our action today. So if we want really to identify the risks, also the opportunities that goes with that, we need to look forward, not backwards, without certainty about what will happen. And scenario analyses can provide some insight into these possible futures and be part, as a result, of the toolkit to assess climate risk. So more than 4 years ago now, the NGFS agreed to develop climate scenarios to provide a common starting point for analyzing climate risk. And last year, we released the 4th vintage of the NGFS climate scenarios. And I'm just going now to show you in a snapshot what is new is in this new edition that has just been released. So the NGFS has a potential future, and I would like to focus on these two interesting editions of this edition. First, the new orderly transition low demand scenario has been added. This scenario assumes that major behavioral change reduce energy demand, allowing mitigating the pressure on the economic system, so to reach global net zero emission around 2050. That's the first new interesting addition. Second, a new family of scenario that was missing in the previous edition has now been populated, assuming that is what you see on the right-hand side there, assuming too little, too late climate policy in that scenarios that lead to significant physical risk on top of transition risk. So these are two new and interesting additions of this year, and I will invite you to have a look on the NGFS website. All of it is available to everybody. Just one word about climate scenarios as a tool for forward-looking analysis. So the scenarios presented are long-term scenarios. These scenarios are necessary. They are a prerequisite to map the interaction between economic and climate dynamics. They are necessary to show the impact of our action today on physical risk in the longer term. Some of these impacts are already materializing today, as we all know. To understand the trade-off and the materiality of climate issues. We also know that financial actors are used to manage risk over much shorter term scenarios, time frame. And importantly as well, we know that we need to better account for short-term volatility and business cycle. In particular, if we want to identify some possible tipping points in the financial systems. So long-term scenarios are definitely necessary. We would not be there today in this room. COP28 would not be taking place if we didn't have this long-term perspective, but they are not sufficient to manage financial risk associated with climate. Short-term scenarios are also necessary to capture these high-frequency events, design adverse scenarios that are really fit for risk assessment exercise by financial institutions, but also for our macro-prudential exercises and policies. So the NGFS has just released a month and a half ago a conceptual note on the development of short-term scenarios, short-term climate scenarios, and it will engage over the year on the development of short-term scenarios. So watch out for these new publications. Another key tool I'd like briefly to focus, to discuss a little bit with you now, is transition plans. So in May this year, the NGFS published a stock take on financial institution transition plan. And this stock take explore the relevance and extent to which transition plan relate to microprudential authorities and their mandates, and whether we can use these new tools, these transition plan, within our supervisory toolkit. So I invite you to have a look at this stock take. Provides a comprehensive view of current frameworks, of current practices, as well as an overview of the current state of play in different jurisdictions. So its key findings can be summarized around 6 findings that you see on the slide there, and I'd like to focus on one of them in particular, on the use of transition plan forward-looking view. So there is a range of frameworks and perspective on the role of transition plans, on the role they can play for the macroprudential authority. But first of all, an important thing is that came out of that stock take is that we should distinguish between transition planning, which is a very important internal process undertaken, for instance, by a firm to develop its transition strategy. And we should distinguish this planning from a transition plan, which is a key product of this transition planning process, and it aims more specifically to ensure transparency with specific audience. Second point I'd like to highlight from this stock take is that while it is, and we've got to recognize that, while it is unlikely that microprudential authorities can really set expectation based on transition plan, too broad, too strategic still, can still help an authority, a supervisor, understand a financial institution strategy to respond to climate risk. So to say differently, transition plan can be used by microprudential authorities to develop a forward-looking view of whether the risk resulting from an institution transition strategy are commensurate with the management framework, the risk management framework that have been put in place. So there are a number of potential uses of this information by the different regulatory authorities. And what, if we really want to leverage this information, is really to ensure coordination across regulatory agencies and standard setting bodies, nationally and internationally, and to ensure that there is interoperability of transition plans. So the NGFS, for instance, has been engaging with a number of international standard setting bodies to clarify more precisely the exact role that this transition plan can play, but also really to try to reduce regulatory fragmentation, help contribute to reduce possible fragmentation. Another issue I'd like now to conclude with is nature-related risk. As I said earlier, so the NGFS has been working on that, is more precisely setting up a task force on biodiversity losses and nature-related risk. About 2 years ago, we have released in September this year our first key product on nature-related risk, conceptual framework that aims really to clarify and establish a common understanding of nature-related risk. So it brings greater clarity on the meaning of concept and how this concept interacts. So it defines really what are nature-related risks. That is what you can see on the slide there. So these negative effect on economies that comes from either is we are in parallel to what we've been doing with climate, the NGFS is now working on better understanding the conceptual foundation to develop relevant nature-related scenarios, again in that dynamic forward-looking approach for risk assessment. And to pave the way of the development of these scenarios, the working group, the task force of the NGFS, so it has been working on exploring narrative, reviewing existing models, but also new approaches, methodologies that could help capture indirect economic impact in particular, and also try to understand the specificities and similarities with the work that we've been doing on climate scenarios. And the result of this work, and again, I invite you to have a look at the next piece of the NGM, the result of this work on nature-related scenarios will be available in 2 weeks on the 5th of December. We will release the first indication as to how to develop nature-related scenarios as well, and what are the key issues we've got to consider while doing this exercise. Again, thinking ahead, trying to remain in a forward-looking perspective. And with these 3 points, I think.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was extremely interesting, and I think it's very interesting to see where your work is taking you to and all the new developments that you have in your climate scenarios. I think we have a little bit of time to take a couple of questions from the audience. So maybe ideally questions that are either addressed to David or to Thomas. I'd like to know if there are any questions now or if we should move to the next part straight away. Is the microphone? 2 questions in the. I don't know if you can see the audience from where you are, David and Thomas, but we have 2 questions. I'm going to take the first one from Sarah. Yeah. You can introduce yourself, please, when you ask the question.
Sure. So my name is Sarah Bendao. I work at the Institute for Climate Economics as a research fellow on development finance. And my question is to David. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, Thomas, as well. On the case studies that you were mentioning of the different approaches in countries, are you able to share maybe a couple of takeaways on the differences that you have seen across different countries, if that's possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that the differences are perhaps broken into 3 different kind of classes. The first is around the risks and challenges faced. As you know, we heard Brazil, that's a great example of a country where the impact on climate really isn't from fossil fuels. Whereas if we look at other countries, for example, Australia and their use of coal, that is a good example of you can have similar potential footprints, but you can also have very different sources. And so understanding how those may be affected in terms of what the transition looks like. And then, of course, we know that physical impacts are global in scale, but also local in impact. So the first is in terms of the actual risk dynamics that exist. I think the second is around the regulatory space. And this really gets to how much time institutions have had to begin developing approaches, analysis, and even the question of data kind of breaks down to, has this been a practice and system of practices for a number of years? And a lot of times people become intimidated looking at reports from 2022 from big Western financial institutions, when the fact is those are the fourth or fifth reports that have been put out. So the overall kind of capacity and level of maturity, as well as the level of regulatory advancement is the second area. And then the final one, I think, is really about the organization itself and what are the ways that this is forming part of their strategy. And so in some cases that may be, this is really central to their strategy, even in the absence of relatively high amounts of data. Other cases, it may be, this is more just sort of an exercise that we're doing because we expect that we'll have to disclose in the future. And so in terms of what we see, I think those factors of different risks, the different both regulatory and kind of maturity of the reporting environment, and then really the focus from the institution itself kind of gives you a bit of the the key areas of differentiation.
Thank you very much, David, for the very clear answer. Thank you. I think we have a second question from Laurent. Yes, we still have about 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, David and Thomas, for those two very rich presentations. It gave me it made me want to read the report. So there's a lot of reading there. That's necessary, I think. My question would be addressed to Thomas. Thomas, I was intrigued and slightly actually taken aback by some of those scenarios, in particular the scenarios where we have low transition risk coupled with low physical risk. So probably the answer to my question would be in the report itself, but it's not intuitive to imagine scenarios with low physical risk as not being scenarios that have actually high or very high transition risk materializing. And I guess we tend to see transition risk as being mostly a demand-driven phenomenon with lower demand for high carbon investments and assets coming, whether that comes from public policy or behavioral change or technological change, right? So yeah, just curious what's behind that particular wonderful scenario, which we would all hope for. Thank you.
Many thanks. I don't know if you can hear me in the room, so jump in otherwise. Many thanks for this question. And indeed, your point is important because maybe I was not very clear, but it's very important. So the low physical risk, low transition risk are so scenarios where we're hoping for that, where everything would happen in a very orderly way. We would start the transition as early as possible, minimizing transition risk and reaching our climate goals, therefore minimizing our physical risks. These scenarios, these planning scenarios, we be all hoping for that everything happen in an orderly way as early as possible. In an efficient way. But the new family of scenarios I was mentioning, these too little, too late scenarios, are not scenarios where you've got low physical and low transition risk. It's actually scenarios where you and higher both physical and transition scenarios. It was this family of scenarios that was missing. So in this new edition, you will find scenarios where actually you've got what you mentioned was very important. In transition, then we've got physical risk. If we don't want physical risk, we to transition. And if we don't do that in an orderly way, then we can transition risk. But then there is another situation that we didn't talk about a lot before within the NGFS, because we actually, these scenarios where you've got the conjunction of both high physical risk and high transition risk. And these too little too late scenarios are precisely that. So we transition badly. So we do have a transition risk, but we don't go far enough in the transition, or it doesn't succeed because of a number of reasons. But also physical risk at the same time materializing. And as you know, because we've got this central bank and supervisor perspective, we are aiming at scenarios where we hope will not happen, these hypothetical scenarios where we materialize. Well, we've got we look at particularly these scenarios that have got high degree of risk, either physical or transition or both. So just to be exactly sure we're on the same page, definitely hoping that that would not happen, but we are definitely aiming at developing scenarios that do highlight some risk, that are adverse in terms of risk. But that's also, and I'd like to be very clear with everybody in the room, that's because we've got a very specific perspective as supervisor. We are also using our scenarios, mainly also so far using our scenarios in risk perspective. So we are designing hypothetical scenarios, but credible scenarios, possible scenarios that are highlighting risk. So just to be very sure that you get clear, all the scenarios that we are developing are really developing here to highlight possible risk. Hoping that helped clarify, Laurent and everybody.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I don't know if there are any other questions. I can probably take one more very quickly. And otherwise, we'll keep them for once we've read the book. I think we're all going to leave with two very interesting reads there, and very much looking forward to reading both the reports that are coming out. You're welcome to stay on for the next part of the discussion. I understand, David, you're joining us from a long way away, and it's very early in the morning for you. So if you want to drop us, we completely understand as well. So feel free to do whichever is best for you. Thank you very much to both of you for those very, very insightful presentations. And we're now going to move to the second part of the discussion, where, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be hearing from practitioners, public development banks. And so I think I'm going to ask our three speakers to come up to the stage, if that's okay. And so we're going to part with start this session on experience sharing between supporting institutions on your respective risk management practices, and with special considerations for long duration portfolios. And I'm going to start by welcoming Ayşe Nazlika, sorry about that, your sustainability coordinator at Industrial Development Bank of Turkey, at TSKB. Ayşe, would you be kindly explain to us how you at TSKB manage climate risk, especially in long-term considerations? Yes, I can put it up. And if you want to come up here, that's fine as well, whichever. Sorry, that's not the right slide. We'll just give them a second to sort. Hello?
Well, thank you very much. I am very happy to be here on the first day of COP with our colleagues from IDFC. And thank you very much, for inviting us to this first event. It's very meaningful. And I believe the knowledge sharing, the capacity building enriches us all together, and we see the performance and also results of the global alignment. And also thank you to the speakers and my panelist colleagues. TSKB, Industrial Development Bank of Turkey, established in 1950. And the main funding of this development bank comes from DFIs and international finance institutions. And we are a long-term lender. and so we have a very strong and very close relationship with our customers. And the technical know-how is within our genes, and we need to monitor, as the other speaker mentioned, is the one of the key element of the total process. Because when we finance project, we see we do have to monitor the impacts and risks, not only financial but physical, climate, and social risks. TSKB is a journey on climate risk management actually goes back to 2005, or maybe earlier. But in that year, we developed our internal environmental risk management system. Actually, we had cooperated with DFIs that we work with. We discussed our model, and we started to implement this risk assessment model for all the investment loans that we finance. 2 years ago, we also started to use this, we call it ERET model, environmental risk assessment model, for our working capital loans as well. And we have signatory global impact in 2010, I believe, and we actually accelerated our works for the climate risk management as well, starting especially after 2019. We formed a group within the bank, climate risk working group, consists of our colleagues from various departments, and working together in a harmonic way, not only from risk management and loan portfolio department, but also from DFI relations, technical engineering team, and other important aspects are included with the know-how of our colleagues. And we have participated first bank in Turkey to UNEP-FI TCFD pilot programs. In 2020, it was started with phase 2, followed by phase 3 in 2021. And we became the TCFD supporter, and we started to work on within our climate risk group for our climate risk report. And we actually prepared the first report of the country, assessing all the climate risk, all the pillars of the TCFD recommendations implemented in our report. And we actually also released our TSKB's climate change mitigation and adaptation policy. Within the policy and the report, the metrics and targets actually incorporated within the climate strategy, which incorporated within and all the other environmental and social risks in the other two. And they are all in the loan allocation and decision-making process of the bank. And this year, last year, we have became the signatory of Net Zero Banking Alliance. And this year, actually, we verified, we did the verification of our SBTi targets, emission reduction targets, and we are happy to announce them. And we are in the transition plan works for our net zero journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha. And that was spot on time. And it was really interesting to have a national development bank at national level and the role of DFIs in that. So thank you very much. I'm now going to pass it over to Laurent Bergada, your sustainable finance expert at the strategy department at the French Development Agency, AFD. If you could take us through and relate to your experience at AFD in managing climate risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Is this is the, oh yes, the pointer. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you. Very happy to share this panel with my esteemed colleagues. This is going to be a high-level presentation of what we do at AFD on climate-related financial risks. I won't. I'll try to remain on topic and won't talk about our wider climate strategy. Obviously, our approach to climate risks is embedded into a wider strategy on climate, but those two are not the same thing. Let me start by saying that we at AFD tend to approach this issue in a holistic way, if I may use the term. So we analyze climate risks, but we also tend to want to identify, analyze, and manage climate-related, but also financial and economic and social climate-related risks and opportunities. And maybe you'll see why a bit later in my presentation. And we work on our own risks, but also on the risks of our clients and partners. And those are both governments, companies, financial institutions, municipalities, and central banks and supervisors, as well as ministries. So we've developed a roadmap on climate-related financial risks a few years back now, 4 or 5 years ago. And this roadmap has 4 main dimensions and is basically structured around 2 main ideas. The first one is that we need to understand and manage our own risks. We are a bank, we need to manage and understand our risks. We also want to manage and understand and help our clients manage their own risks. So we have obviously an obvious risk management perspective here. But we also consider climate-related financial risks as a very powerful tool to further mitigation and adaptation goals. And those are very different. So we can work on climate-related financial risks as a way to engage in a strategic dialogue with either companies or governments on their mitigation and adaptation pathways. So this is an operational perspective, and the two obviously go hand in hand. So the general framework: first of all, we work on our own operation, our own risk management. Number 2, we work with partner financial institutions, central banks, and regulators, and finance ministries on the financial sector. Number 3, we use this general approach to climate-related financial risks and opportunities as a way to engage in policy dialogues, both on mitigation and adaptation, using usually fairly in-depth macroeconomic or microeconomic modeling. And number 4, we, as I think we all do, work on outreach and awareness raising on this issue. So the first aspect of our roadmap, I won't go into the details, but we have now finished rolling out tools to analyze both transition and physical risks. I mean, the starting point involves some modeling, and which I won't go into, but the end point, which is what matters really, is that we have a simple kind of green light tool, green red light tool, which allows us to flag those particular investments where we know that we will have particular physical and transition risk, and then we have qualitative sectoral questionnaires that we've developed in-house, which can help our operational teams actually engage in the issue and try to understand, and then perhaps help our borrowers manage these particular risks. So in a nutshell, this is what we're doing on the management of our own risks. on the financial system side, well, I've sort of said it all really, which is that we work with both financial institutions, but also with central banks and supervisors to basically develop tools, and these can be this can go from a simple, mapping of risks to more in-depth modeling. So it really depends on the context and where we can be of any help, really. And one interesting aspect here, perhaps, is that in this process, we as a bank as well, right? We learn as much as we are able to share. So this is maybe once again thank you to the mainstreaming initiative, because it's very important that we all continue progressing and learning together. We still have a lot to learn on the issue, and I think it's a moving target. We need to continually improve our tools and analyses. On policy dialogue, as I've mentioned, we have two main approaches here. One which is using macroeconomic modeling, and we have an in-house macroeconomic modeling team that developed a modeling tool called GEM, and which is very powerful. And we've worked in Brazil, Colombia, Ivory Coast, Morocco, Tunisia, and Vietnam on both adaptation and mitigation. So basically understanding how countries are affected by these risks and what are the optimal policy pathways to mitigate them as best as possible. The other important program we've developed here with the help of external partners, CPI Energy Finance, which was later acquired by Willis Towers Watson, is a program of microeconomic modeling with a strong financial component. This also is a tool that we use at the country level, and the particularity of this approach, and I think it's interesting, is that it allows to analyze how different actors in a given country are affected differently by either in this case transition scenarios. And so the devil is in the details, and if you really take the time to analyze things carefully, you will realize that actually transition risks are not homogeneous, that there are losers and winners, and if you identify that very carefully, you can work and support those particular companies, municipalities, sectors, or areas in a given country that are actually might lose in a transition scenario, and then you actually alleviate one of the important blocks to further mitigation policies. That's it. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurent, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your experience. We're pleased to be able to organize that. And now I'm going to turn over to you, Luis Gabriel Todd de Azevedo. That's pronounced properly. Your Chief Strategy Officer at IDB Invest. And yes, if you could present your relationship to climate risk management and what you've been doing at IDB Invest in that matter. You can choose either. If you prefer to say, that's fine. Yeah. You just need a mic.
Oh, I can do it from here if that's okay. Yeah, I'll do. No, thank you so much. I'm sorry. Is this working? It's working here? Yeah, good. So thank you so much. No, it's I don't have a presentation, so I'll try to be brief. First, thanks for the invite and congratulations. It's always good to benchmark ourselves and with other banks. And I see here many banks that are partners or clients of IDB and IDB Invest. We are a multilateral bank focusing on Latin America. IDB Invest is the private part of the IDB group. We basically finance non-sovereign non-sovereign institutions and without sovereign guarantee. So that's basically the private sector and certain state-owned enterprises that have independence in that sense. For us, like the other colleagues that preceded me, climate risk management is part of an overall climate strategy, and I think Lauren explained that very well. And I'll try to focus on the risk part per se, as he did. What we try to do at IDB Invest is really to reconcile a process in which we approach climate risk top down and bottom up. Top down, focusing on our strategies and our policies that need to be followed during the implementation of our lending program or investment programs, and bottom up by working with every single client and every single project in terms of analyzing, assessing, and helping clients to mitigate, first to assess, and second to mitigate their own risks, which in turn translates indirectly into risks to our balance sheet. At the transition level, at the transaction level, we have been screening every single operation for both physical and transition risk for the past 3 years. So we started during the COVID. We've developed our own tools. We continue to update those tools and look at what others are doing. So every operation is screened, and then if we very much like the AFT, if we run into projects that raise red flags, then we go deeper, work with clients, and decide how to address those specific risks. What we have seen in our portfolio is in a way split. About 40% of the projects always follow in the green zone or have been following the green zone. About 30%, a little more than 30% on the yellow zone, and then about a quarter or close to a third, depending on the year, that follow on the red zone. I won't go into much details of the red zone because I think that relates to one of the questions that comes later. We are also one of the three multilateral banks that since January 2023 have been fully aligned to Paris. So every single project we finance starting January this year is aligned with the Paris Agreement. It's something that we've decided as a group that applies to us and to the IDB. The other two multilaterals that we've started this year are EBRD and EIB, both in Europe. All the other multilaterals, so most of the others have made pledges to start either later this year or next year, but we are in the first comer group, which brings a lot of advantages and a lot of challenges, right? Learning as you do. So it's been very intense learning process that we would be glad to share with others what we've learned so far, what has worked, what has not worked. And that process tends to continue and to be definitely more comprehensive as other banks in the multilateral family adhere to that process. We all follow an overarching framework that has been agreed among MDBs, and then that overarching framework is rolled down to the specific characteristics of sectors and regions where we operate. In terms of our portfolio, what we've learned and that is key is really long-term supervision commitment beyond the structuring of the operation. So for every single project, we expected to have material GHG emissions. We ask our clients to report those emissions to us on an annual basis, and we monitor their agreed plans to progressively reduce those emissions as part of our engagement with them. On a case-by-case basis, we accompany and help clients with technical assistance, especially on more significant challenges such as Scope 3 emissions mapping, which is relevant to many of our clients on our region, and which are more complex and difficult to track. Our objective as a development bank remains to help our clients to decarbonize and be resilient. So adaptation and trying to assess, resilience, preparedness, and ability to respond to the existing challenges is also very key. So we both look at medium and long, but we also try to assess shorter term risks to our clients. From a couple other things that I could say in terms of what we're doing and what we are learning. First, on I think there's been a great deal of development, and most of the banks, in this list here and ourselves have evolved and developed their own procedures on to a larger or lesser extent. Some are more advanced, some are catching up, but we're all going in the same direction. So there's no question on the what. I think the question is on how and how fast, right? So we all focus on that route. What we are looking at now as our next frontier at IDB Invest, more than just assess and then try to mitigate the risks and eventually engage and not engage with some clients or some projects. We want to expand our menu of incentives and disincentives. And our next frontier, which we are already piloting in a large part of our portfolio, is really to incorporate climate risks into our credit risk scorecards, so that when at the end, the end goal is that our credit risk ratings for our clients would be adjusted for their climate risk. That's the general idea that we are piloting, and that translates into pricing incentives or disincentives, right? Lower risk to us, better pricing; higher risk, higher pricing. So this is the frontier that we're experimenting with now. And finally, to conclude, one area that we've been trying to put a lot of emphasis, and we think it's very, very important amongst what the issue that we're talking about, is transparencies to stakeholders and walking the talk. I think this is fundamental. At IDB Invest, we have been supporters of the TCFD since 2019. And since then, we have detailed disclosures of our portfolio on our annual reports. And it's really encouraging to us to see over this period, since we start doing about 5 years ago, this is our 5th year doing it, how the landscape has evolved and how more and more players are becoming part of a process of disclosure, of transparency, which is fundamental for all of us to really to nail down what the next steps in our journey needs to be. With that, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gabriel, for sharing your insights from an MDB's perspective. It's very, very interesting, and also having the private sector English is very, very useful too. Now we have a second round of questions that was prepared for you, some more specific questions to relate a little bit on how these different processes have allowed you to improve your practices, and focusing specifically on capacity building, financing adaptation and mitigation, and engaging with hard to abate sectors. So the first question goes to you, Aisha. Considering the different levels of advancement in climate risk management of the institutions that Development Bank might engage with, what are the key steps, in your view, to support them in addressing their risks in the longer term? So counterparty engagement.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for the question. First of all, I have to mention that at the beginning of my speech in the first round, actually, continue where I left. Our Science-Based Target Initiative approved targets. Actually, we completed our studies and verification process in July 2023. And we got approval from our board and disclosed our targets actually for 2035. And we had set sectoral decarbonization approach model targets for two sectors, electricity generation and real estate. And the other most of the other corporate loans, long-term corporate loans, were actually in the target of portfolio temperature scoring. And for actually for both models, we have different approaches. And actually, for the first one, we need well, we calculate the GHG intensity, emission intensity of our clients, and we calculate the mitigation percentage for 2035 for the whole portfolio. So what we do, we follow our target actually, or actually commitment of non-fossil fuel, non-coal power generation risk actually decline. I mean, the phase out of the coal. And also, we will continue to increase the portion of renewable energy portfolio, which is a very high percentage in the portfolio, even more. And we will also continue with some adaptation projects. And real estate as well. We will continue to follow up our portfolio. But the rest of the portfolio, I mean the corporate loans, we will definitely be in close relationship with them in order to set a sustainability management system and to calculate their GHG emissions and set a roadmap for transition and some setting actually smart targets. And this is a challenge. I mean, some of the companies that we work with, they are very, in a high level. In order, some of them are the sectors in the CBAM, which they are preparing for 2026, and they are exporters to Europe. But some of them, they are in the beginning process of this transition, so they are actually they are far away from the others. So what we do, we try to advise them, to help them setting their sustainability management system, start to actually calculate their performance, monitor them, and set their strategy for transition. And we have an advisory company, Escarus. Actually, Escarus is a very reputable company, advisory company on sustainability management in Turkey. And we work with them for our clients or the sectors in general for the transition. So we give them actually the roadmaps and advisory services. So this is actually a process that includes all the stakeholders. Actually, in order to reach our green transformation, we definitely need the regulatory body to be involved in. So we know that in our country, after the ratification of Paris Agreement, we are always almost at the end of the climate law and preparations in long-term strategy for climate change, mitigation with combating with climate change. So we see that sectoral roadmaps will be developed under the ministries, and we will see some incentives, as you mentioned. Definitely, it is needed. And BRSA, Banking Regulatory Body, also works with the banks, with the financial systems. They are aware of the current situation and needed financing for climate change. So the standards and regulations will also be enhancing the transformation, I believe, and it will speed up the environment to be involved further. So thank you very much. If any question from the audience, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Aisha, and thank you for sharing your relationship with the counterparts and how it needs to be and can be a multi-stakeholder process. It was very interesting and insightful. Thank you for that. I'll pass it over now to Laurent for the second question. And Laurent, I think what we'd like to hear from you is how your work on climate risks, so both physical and transitional, have already impacted or might impact in the future some of the funding that you might on lend to for adaptation and mitigation as the French Development Agency.
Okay, thank you. Yes, very happy to address this question. Perhaps taking a wider view, because there is a relationship between climate risk analysis and management and funding for mitigation and adaptation, both at the bank level, but also at the wider economy level. So broadly speaking, I've mentioned this, and I think you've just said it as well, that there is a very positive and direct relationship between, on the one hand, looking at climate risks, identifying them, and the furthering of mitigation and adaptation financing, because very simply, to put it very simply, the best mitigation strategy for either a company or even a government in the face of climate transition risks is to have an ambitious mitigation strategy, moving away from brown assets, etc. And so that's stating the obvious, but I think it's very important for a development bank to be very conscious of this positive relationship, because we should try and leverage it as much as we can with our clients, with our partners. And the same holds true with regards to physical risks, obviously. And by the way, one of our frontiers going forward, you mentioned frontiers. I believe on our side is not only improving the tools as they exist for managing our risks, but also trying to use those tools, this internal knowledge that we are building, to help inform our overall strategy and the operationals. And so building a bridge between risks and operations as we move forward, basically identifying where we need to invest more to support our clients' need for risk mitigation. The second and last point I wanted to raise relative to your question is that this positive relationship is not systematic. There are actually many cases where the relationship is negative, where there is actually a choice to be made. And once again, as development banks, I think we need to be aware of those instances where we need to choose between, because sometimes we need to choose between lowering our risks as much as we can and continuing to support and fund our partners. And so maybe for an example, in the mitigation space, if we want to continue supporting not only transition pathways in high emissive plants, such as, I don't know, for example, a electricity utility that's 80% coal, and that's transitioning, and we want to support it with a with a general corporate purpose loan attached to strategic dialogue, then we need to bring on additional transition risks on our balance sheet, and we need to accept that. The same actually holds true with simple renewable financing to a electric utility that's already very brown. If we want to continue just supporting the green investments, sometimes we need to accept to add on transition risks to our balance sheet. And I think this is something that leads us to understand risks, but it happens that AFD, we have a very green portfolio, basically, because we've been financing 50% climate finance for new flows for a few years now. And so starting from such a low point, I don't think for example, we need to commit to lowering our portfolio level transition risks. Actually, we might see that those risks will increase. And the same is true for physical risk. We need to continue supporting countries that are exposed to physical risks, and help them adapt. And this means financing. This means exposing ourselves to additional physical risks to the limit that is possible for a regulated bank, obviously. So yeah, being aware of those two relationships and managing them, I think, is important.
Thank you, Laurent. That was very interesting and not necessarily, I think, very intuitive for everybody. So it's very interesting to hear how, in some instances, it's important to be able to accept to increase the risks of your balance sheet. And I think it also introduces very nicely the last question that we were going to ask to you, Gabriel, on how, well, in order to decarbonize their portfolios, we know that some commercial banks have to limit their exposure to hard to abate sectors. The FIs, on the other hand, should be more concerned with the overall impact of their investment. So that relates to what Laurent was just saying. And in that context, we were wondering how, from your point of view, how these DFIs could be more effective in managing exposure to high emitting sectors and pushing for sectoral decarbonization. So I think it's reflecting a little bit on what Laurent just said as well.
This is a very, very good and important question for all of us, banks and development banks in particular. And I think Laurent's answer made me change the introduction to my answer a little bit, because he did talk very well about taking risks, right? Which I agree are absolutely necessary if we want, as development banks, make a difference. Just an hour ago or a few minutes ago, in this pavilion, just across from us, like 10 minutes walk, there's been a panel with President Macron, the first minister of the UK, the head of IMF, who else? Mia Mottley, the fantastic lady who was the first, who was the prime minister of Barbados, and other world leaders. The president of Colombia spoke, and all of them speak about bigger and better MDBs, development banks, and that is what his answer brought to my attention. Part of being bigger and being better is not what they're saying is, we don't want you to be bigger to do more of the same. We want you to be bigger to be different. And to be different, you need to take more risks. Because when you talk about high emitting sectors, hard to abate sectors, and as development banks impacting being our North Star, what we want to achieve, we need to be able to continue to support our clients on their efforts to decarbonize, right? And that's a message also to commercial banks. Simply taking those assets out of your balance sheet, it's not going to solve the problem. It's going just to move the problem elsewhere, right? It's not going to resolve it. So we need to engage those clients, not only ourselves as development banks, but also private banks, I think, have an opportunity, especially with their long-term relationship clients, to engage on that process. And that's not a blank check. nor from us, development banks, or from commercial banks. That needs to be linked to very clear targets and objectives in terms of the decarbonization path, as Laurent spoke before me. So this is something that commercial banks should be open to. I think a lot of the idea of cleaning your balance sheet is also driven by the fact that they do not want to engage on reputational risks. But if they can counterfactor that reputational risk with products that clearly address a decarbonization path, I think they have a good story to tell. And for us, MDBs, we do have a very important role to play in that process of bringing commercial banks to join this fight. So, for instance, we cannot shy away from our clients, for instance, in the cement or the steel industry that we know are really trying to decarbonize, right? This process of decarbonization requires financing. Those clients need financing, but they also need technical assistance. They need knowledge, and they need people backing them up in terms of their reputational risk. Again, in that front, MDBs have a critical role to play. At IDB Invest, we are in the process of approving our new vision and business model coherent with the call by the G20 for bigger and better MDBs. And our model, we are calling it Originate to Share. And what that means for us is we do not want to be the main investor. We want to be a platform to give comfort to de-risk assets for other investors to come. When we talk about what's needed, we don't need billions. We need trillions. And the MDBs will never get to trillions. Only the private sector can bring us from billion to trillions. Now, what the MDBs can do is being a catalyst, being a facilitator to bring those private sector assets to this fight, to this process of decarbonization. And by doing this, we can really facilitate moving from billions to trillions. So that's what we are trying to do at IDB Invest, do our part. Our level of ambition is very high. On our new business model, it's even higher, and we are we are always looking for partners, for partnerships, and for opportunities to work with the other multilateral banks in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, and very interesting insight on the role of MDBs as compared to maybe the rest of the financial sector. I don't know if there are any questions. We have about 5 minutes for questions. Otherwise, I can close from the audience. I know there's some listening to us online, but I'm not sure they have the possibility of asking any questions. So, no. I'm getting a no for an answer. Okay, well, in that case, I think I'm just going to thank you very much. I know it's already been a long day for us all. Thank you very much for sharing those very interesting insights. And I think it was nice to have a representative from a national development bank, a bilateral development bank, and an MDB, because we see that even between public development banks, the roles and synergies and value addeds are different. And if you take into account the private sector, it's even more complex. So thank you very much to the three of you. Thanks again to Thomas and David, if you're still online with us. Just to let you know that this session, this workshop is going to be made available online on the website of the Mainstreaming Climate and Financial Institutions Initiative. So for those of you who want to take another look or to watch this conversation again, please feel free to do so. And we look forward to hearing from you again and to speaking with you soon again. Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day if you need to go somewhere else. Thank you.
Together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC